Indonesia Food and Drug Authority or Badan POM, and Indonesia National Standardization Agency or BSN, association, private sectors, researchers, academia, UNIDO partners, and all of the participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon and good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ita Suhalia. I will be your master ceremony today. It is my honor on behalf of event organizer, the cooperation between UNIDO, MMAF, and BSN under the Global Quality and Standard Program to welcome all of you in a validation workshop of the Standard Compliance Analytic Report, or in Bahasa Indonesia, Workshop Validasi Laporan Analitik Pemenuhan Standar. Bapak Ibu, as an agricultural and also maritime country, Indonesia is among the biggest agri-food exporter with commodities such as palm oil, coffee, rubber, cacao, and in the seafood sector, we have tuna, seafood, shrimp, seaweed, and many more. You can name it. They contribute not only for national, but also global economic and food security. And today we will discuss the 10 years of export trend of Indonesia agri-food commodity. Bapak Ibu, our workshop agenda will consist of opening remarks, presentation of standard compliant analytic report, followed by discussions, recap, and closing. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please allow us to start our workshop with the opening remarks. To begin with, we will have an opening remark from UNIDO representative. Therefore, I would like to invite Bapak Nima Bahramalian, the Industrial Development Expert, Directorate of Technical Cooperation and Sustainable Industrial Development of UNIDO. Recap Pak Nima, closing. Yeah, Pak Nima, time is yours. Hello, Nima, can you hear us?
Hello. Yes, I hear you. Thank you very much, Ita, and good afternoon to my colleagues in Indonesia. It's a pleasure to be here and having this workshop with you. And I see we have more than 100 of participants, which is great, because the idea of this workshop is also to get very good inputs from the perspective of the institutions and actors within the sector in Indonesia who are responsible or have a stake on the exports and production of agro-food products. The standards compliance analytics is a very unique tool, because it looks at a particular problem that shows its result in the border rejection. Often exports of products happen, and often sometimes they are getting rejected at the borders because of non-compliance with technical regulations and standards. And this piece of information remains hidden to the exporters or to the regulators at large. The standards compliance analytics is the only tool available that aggregates the border rejection data from major importing markets and harmonizes them and presents them in a way that can provide very useful information for the exporting countries. It helps both on the side of the producers to understand better what are the requirements and major challenges in terms of complying with the regulation, but also it helps the national institutions who are in charge of the quality infrastructure and the conformity assessment services, who are responsible for detecting and supporting the exporters to prove compliance with the regulations. And it helps them to identify where are the gaps in the national quality infrastructure, and where are the gaps in the conformity assessment services, and where are the gaps within the industry itself, in order to prioritize the investments. So I'm very happy to be here today, together with my colleagues from the GQSP project Indonesia, and also from my colleague Dora from remotely, to present to you the report that we have for the SCA. This tool has been supported by the government of Switzerland, the development of it, and this workshop also is implemented within the GQSP program. So I look forward very much to have this presentation, but also to have a very lively discussion afterwards. The inputs that we receive from this workshop are critical because the idea of this report is to present what can be taken from the data. But it is important to put that information or that analysis into context. Therefore, we have these workshops today to present what are the outcomes of the analysis, what could be potentially the recommendations to address those findings or the challenge areas, and understand better from the national institutional perspective what could be the responses. And getting those feedback will help us to shape and refine the recommendations and finalize the report, which eventually would be a report that would be also a UNIDO, but also a shared report also with the government of Indonesia. So therefore, it's really important for us and for the report to be able to target very accurately the recommendations that should follow. And therefore, I look forward to the discussion that we have. Today, Mr. Stefan Keser was not able to attend here, the chief of the division on SME competitiveness. He was on mission, so I am also sending his regards to the workshop, and on his behalf also wishing a good workshop today. Thank you. Ita, back to you.
Terima kasih banyak Bapak Nima untuk pengantar tujuan dari workshop untuk validasi laporan SCA ini supaya akurat, di mana laporan tadi disebutkan mengcapture juga tantangan-tantangan yang dihadapi negara eksportir, juga mengcapture gap baik di bidang quality infrastructure dan juga CABs atau Conformity Assessment Body dan industrianya. Review dan feedback dari Bapak Ibu sangat diharapkan karena laporan ini akan disubmit kepada pemerintah Indonesia. And also we would like to convey our greeting also to Pak Stefan Nima. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Sure.
Bapak Ibu, for the following remark, we cordially invite Ibu PLT Dirjen CABs Product Competitiveness of MMAF to officially open our workshop. Please welcome our DG, Ibu Ishartini. Kepada pemerintah Indonesia. And also we would like to convey our greeting also to Ibu Ishartini, apakah bisa mengakses mikrofon?
Ya, ya Mbak. Terima kasih
baik.
banyak. Maaf saya nggak bisa nyalakan video, enggak apa-apa ya? Ya bisa nyalakan kamera. Ya. Terima kasih banyak Mbak. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Selamat siang. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Terima kasih atas kehadirannya di dalam workshop pada siang hari ini. Izin saya masih di dalam perjalanan ini. Yang saya hormati Pak Nima, Program Manager dari UNIDO, kemudian teman-teman dari Kementerian Perdagangan, dari BPOM, Kementerian Perindustrian, Kemtan, dari BSN atau yang mewakili, teman-teman dari Dijen PDS, Pak Dr. Ahmad Purnomo, apa kabar Pak? Sudah lama ketemu, Pak Sudari, kemudian para tenaga ahli, Ketua Asosiasi, GAPMI, dan Asosiasi Sektor Perikanan dan Pertanian, teman-teman dari UNIDO, ada Miss Dor Berbe, selaku salah satu narasumber dari acara workshop kita. Ibu dan Pak sekalian yang saya hormati, kalau kita melihat dinamika ekonomi global mensyaratkan pertumbuhan ekonomi yang harus kuat. Keberadaan persaingan ekonomi dunia menuntut kita semua di Indonesia untuk terus memperkuat potensi ekonominya. Yang salah satunya dapat dilakukan adalah dengan meningkatkan produk perdagangan Indonesia di pasar internasional. Di subsektor perikanan, kita harus memiliki kebanggaan. Kita melihat tren ekspor produk perikanan yang terus meningkat ya. Bahkan selama pandemi kemarin juga kita punya nilai ekspor yang meningkat ya, tahun 2020. ada 5,2 miliar US dollar, masih meningkat 6,8% dari tahun sebelumnya. Ini terus meningkat di 2021 sampai 5,72 miliar US dollar, dan 2022 ini kita targetkan sampai 7 miliar. Sekarang sudah posisi di 5,1 ya, mudah-mudahan nanti kita bisa mencapai di atas 6 ya. Angka-angka itu dapat lebih tinggi jika kita mampu mengatasi tantangan dalam perdagangan. Di perdagangan internasional, produk makanan kemungkinan akan menghadapi hambatan penolakan dengan berbagai alasan karena kualitas dan regulasi yang berlaku. Ini adalah tantangan besar bagi Indonesia. Saat ini khususnya di sektor perikanan, KKP melalui para pembina mutu, baik itu ada di pusat maupun di daerah, selalu menyelenggarakan pembinaan dan pelatihan dalam rangka meningkatkan kesadaran produsen Indonesia mengenai aplikasi dari Good Manufacturing Practices, ya, GMP, sanitasi, dan keamanan pangan. Namun, Ibu Bapak sekalian, solusi alternatif terhadap penolakan Indonesia harus segera diadaptasi. Langkah pertama yaitu melakukan analisis alasan penolakan. Apakah mengarah pada kategori kualitas produk di sektor tertentu atau ada alasan lain. Nah, UNIDO sebagai partner dari KKP saat ini sudah menyiapkan sebuah draft ya, Report on the Standard Compliance Analytic Report, Border Rejection and Major Global Market for Agro-Food Products Exported from Indonesia. Ya, terima kasih. Analisis ini sudah dilakukan dengan melihat tren data selama 10 tahun terakhir dengan fokus pada produk dari Australia, RRT, Uni Eropa, Jepang, dan Amerika Serikat. Hal ini akan menjadi salah satu kontribusi besar dari UNIDO untuk mendukung program-program di KKP. Nah, kami berharap selanjutnya informasi dari laporan ini akan sangat bermanfaat dalam penyusunan kebijakan yang mendukung perdagangan produk Indonesia di masa mendatang. Untuk itu, saya berharap kita semua dapat mengikuti workshop ini dengan baik. Bapak Ibu mohon bisa memberikan saran masukan yang membangun sehingga kita semua dapat memiliki pemahaman yang sama, semangat yang sama untuk bisa membangun sektor perikanan ini ke arah yang lebih maju. Untuk itu, secara resmi dengan mengucapkan Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, saya nyatakan kegiatan validation workshop of the Standard Compliance Analytic Report hari ini saya resmikan dibuka. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih Ibu Dirjen.
Terima kasih banyak Ibu Dirjen. We are delighted you are here with us to open the workshop. Not only open the workshop, but it seems you read the detail, the report, Ibu. It is honor for us for it. Ladies and gentlemen, as Ibu Dirjen mentioned, one of key economic growth is through increase the export. For fisheries itself, 1.72 billion USD after the pandemic, and this number it's constantly increase. Challenges, quality, and regulation apply in imported country, and also she also highlighted the effort of MMRF to overcome with these challenges. We hope through this workshop that can explore more what we can do and also what can UNIDO support, especially for the government of Indonesia. Bapak Ibu, we continue with the following agenda. We will have photo sessions. It is appreciated if you could please turn on your camera and give us your big smile. My colleague Nancy and also Mbak Diana will guide for the photo session. Over to you, Mbak Nancy.
Thank you, Bu Ita. Bapak Ibu, para peserta yang terhormat, kita memasuki sisi foto bersama. Mohon untuk mengaktifkan kameranya. Terdapat 3 screen. Kita mulai dari screen yang pertama dalam hitungan ketiga. 1, 2, 3. Ya, screen kedua, Bu Diana silahkan.
Selanjutnya,
Screen kedua, 1, 2, 3. Ya, screen ketiga, Nancy silakan.
Ya, screen ketiga 1, 2, 3. Terima kasih Bu Ita. Saya kembalikan kepada Bu Ita.
Terima kasih banyak Mbak Nancy. Ibu Dirjen, please allow us to move forward to another agenda, Ibu. Okay, Bapak Ibu, let us move forward to the main discussions. This session will be led by Bapak Dr. Ahmad Purnomo. He is well known as Pak Ipung, his nickname. Please allow me to briefly introduce our moderator, and Mbak Alia, please share the screen of Pak Ipung short bio. Bapak Dr. Ahmad Purnomo is a quality infrastructure expert of UNIDO Global Quality and Standard Program Indonesia. Currently, he also serves as a senior lecturer for fish processing technology at Jakarta Fisheries Polytechnic, or we know as the Poltek AUP. Pak Ipung also columnist at Trobos Aqua Magazine. He has very extensive experience in managing quality infrastructure, especially for fisheries sector in Indonesia. Please welcome Pak Ipung. Assalamualaikum Bapak.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. Selamat sore semuanya. Ibu Ita, I do not know if there is an interpreter for this workshop. Apakah ada interpreter?
No, Pak, we don't have interpreter, but we already distributed the Indonesia version of the PowerPoint.
All right then. For my colleagues, Bapak Nima, Ibu Helena, dan the speaker for today, ya, Ibu. Wait, I have to remember again, Ibu Dora Berbah. Good afternoon, all of you.
Good afternoon.
Selamat sore. I will be speaking in Bahasa Indonesia mostly. Please, fellows, allow me to do that. Pak Nima dan others. Ya. Selamat datang. Ini teman-teman dari BSN. Saya lihat ada dari Badan POM. Kemudian dari KKP, of course, ada 2. KKP saya lihat dari Direktorat Jenderal PDS dan Badan Karantina Ikan. Ada saya lihat dari Kementerian Pertanian, dari Biro Kerjasama Luar Negeri. Ada juga Kementerian Perdagangan. Kemudian asosiasi, saya lihat ada GAPMI, ada AP2HI, ada AP5I, ada juga Asosiasi Rumput Laut Indonesia, atau Indonesian Seaweed, semoga saya tidak salah. Dan tentu saja GQSP, tim Global Quality Support Program. Good afternoon, all of you. I don't want to take your time too much, but I would like to introduce our speaker today. It's Ibu Dora Berbah. I'm sorry if I misspell your name. Position is Project Associate, Directorate of Technical Cooperation and Sustainable Industrial Development of UNIDO. She coordinates the different project activities for the quality infrastructure program for Central Africa in 7 beneficiary countries. And she's very fluent in English, French, and Spanish. She's also comprehended data management, business analysis, and customer support. She has a master's degree on Master Science, Health and Informatics from USA, and Bachelor on Computer Science, and Bachelor of Art in Spanish. So no wonder why she used the word analytic rather than analysis, because she has a background in computer science. Data analytics usually used in computer science, right? Now, I would like to ask Dora to start the presentation, validation on work on standard compliance analytics. Please do so if you have the presentation, or probably Ibu Ita can help.
Yeah, Dora, we will use the Bahasa Indonesia version for the presentation. My colleague will share screen, Mbak Diana. Please.
No problem.
put
I can do the
screen
same
up.
as well if you want.
Yes.
Up to you.
Oh, okay.
I also have it.
All right. You can do it. For the first, Nima would like to have perhaps some introductions before we go to Dora. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, please go for it, Nima. Thank
Okay,
you very
please,
much.
Nima.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Pak Purnomo. Let me share my screen. I will not go into details of the report on Indonesia, but I will just give you a very brief background on what is the standards compliance analytics report and how we are basically doing, and some explanatory remarks on the data as well, so that it puts the Indonesian report in a way into perspective. So the standards compliance analytics is a tool that is basically taking the border rejection data. And today we are going to talk about what is the border rejection data, what is the tool, how the tool is using the border rejection data, what are the indicators that we are using for analysis of different industries and countries. And Dora, my colleague, will present an in-depth assessment of Indonesia, and then we will continue to having a discussion. So a little bit of description of the data, what it is. So basically, many of the important countries, they collect data on the incoming consignments. They test them randomly, and when they are rejected for various reasons, because of not meeting the regulatory requirements, they reject them. And some of them, these major markets, they record this data and they have it with them. But these data are not reported widely. So this remains within the authorities in the major importing markets. And secondly, these data are not harmonized. So if you look at, for instance, how China is reporting on the consignments that it rejects and how EU is reporting on the consignments that it rejects, they are totally different. And therefore, there is no, let's say, global repository of this data. Nevertheless, all these data, they contain some information, some key information that they're quite critical. One is that, of course, it shows the source of the consignment. Where did this consignment come from? What was the reason for the rejection? Whether it was because of as not meeting the minimum residue levels, for instance, in terms of pesticides, or was it because of lack of documentation, or was it because of physical defect? So various reasons that are being used for the rejection of the consignment are recorded in this data, and that's also a critical piece of information. The other piece of information is some sort of classification of the product. Either it is used as an HS code for classification, or is just a description of the product. There is also information on the date of the rejection of the consignments. So when was this consignment rejected? And sometimes there is also indication of the volume and value of the consignment. Now, what UNIDO has done in terms of standards compliance analytics have gotten the data from the major importing markets of Australia, China, EU, Japan, and the US for now, and has harmonized these rejection data so that they can be aggregated and some analysis at the global level can be then undertaken. And that is what the rejection data will tell us, basically. It will tell us it will tell us information about all the exporting countries and their products. How do they meet the requirements of the markets, and how often do they get rejected? Now, why is this? Why should we analyze this data? I think that's a question that we have to first answer. Because, of course, the international trade is governed by the standards and regulation. And these standards and regulations are evolving over time. That means the exporting countries will have to also continuously make sure that they meet these regulation and standards. That means continuously invest in their capacities at the industry, or invest in the conformity assessment services and quality infrastructure to be able to support and prove compliance of the products to these changing requirements. Now, the major challenge when this question is where to build the capacity and what is the priority to build the capacity of the industry or the quality infrastructure. The first question is that where is the biggest challenge? How do we identify where do we have the challenge? And it is important because, of course, the financial resources and the time is limited and the human resources is limited. So therefore, any investment that needs to take place needs to be prioritized. In order to prioritize these investments, it's important to understand where the major compliance challenge exists. And in the trade context, the major compliance challenge means where most of the rejections are taking place. So that's why we analyze the border rejection data, to understand where the major compliance challenges are. So what can this tell us? The rejection. It can tell us which products are rejected, whether it is fisheries, seafood, or it is coffee, or is it tea. It will tell us what products are rejected and why are they rejected, the reason for rejection. Is it because of documentation, or is it because of the bacterial contamination? It will tell us how frequently they are rejected. That means whether we can see over the 10 years consistent high level of rejection in seafood products. That will tell us that there's a systematic problem with the compliance in that sector. Or has it been only a one-off increase in the rejection? And it will tell us also in which markets are they rejected. Whether it is a problem that the regulation in one market is more strict, or is it that the seafood products, for instance, are rejected across different markets. Once we analyze this data, then we will basically be able to identify the specific industry challenges. We can also identify where are the inefficiencies in the quality infrastructure and the conformity assessment services. For instance, whether there is issue in terms of harmonization of standards. Sometimes these regulations are not harmonized. The exporters are complying with the national regulations, but when it comes to export, these regulations are not enough. They do not support the compliance with the requirements of the export market. And it also tells us the risk to market share because of rejection. Sometimes they have implications beyond the economic, and they can basically have reputational damage and therefore risk the market share of a particular sector. And once we identify these where the problems are, the border rejection data can help us to act in the sense of building capacity of the conformity assessment services to detect these non-compliances before the consignments leave the country. It can help us to build compliance capacity of the export-oriented industry. It can help us build capacity of the various sectors that they have higher rejection rates. And it also helps to build awareness and devise policy responses to address the issues if it's needed. We used to publish, as UNIDO, we used to publish these reports in a physical form, printed form, but since 2 years ago, we have digitalized the platform where an online tool is available to any user from across the globe to go to the website. And the main features of the website is that it provides the opportunity for the user to filter a specific report that is interested in, to filter, for instance, a specific market, a specific product, a specific exporting country. And it provides the analysis at 3 levels. It provides analysis at the global level, so one can compare a country at the global level, the performance of a country in terms of meeting the requirements of the market. It can also go one level lower or deeper and do a more detailed comparison between 3 countries. So the 3 countries can be selected, either they're competitors or they are selling into the same markets, or they have the same sectoral structure in their economy. But one can compare the 3 countries. And lastly, at the country level, it can provide a detailed analysis and provide, for instance, comparison between the sectors within the country. Now, some definitions. I go and I end my presentations with these definitions. These definitions are basically of the indexes. So we use the rejection data, but in the raw form, the rejection data just tells us about the rejection rate, how many consignments have been rejected. That is a useful piece of information, but of course is not enough. So we from the rejection data and using the trade data, we have devised basically additional indexes that help us to look at the rejection data more accurately and also be able to compare between the countries. So there are 4 main indexes that I will just explain to you. The first one is the aggregate rejection rate. So basically, it's a simple sum or add up of the number of consignments that have been rejected over time in each market. So you see it in the table like that for instance, this, I believe this is from, this must be from maybe Indonesia, I'm not sure, but from a country, just
I think India.
India. Okay, thank you, Duro. So this is from India. It's an example that shows, for instance, in 2010, into the Australian markets, 28 consignments from India were rejected. Well, that's a very simple indicator. It just tells us how many consignments were rejected. And you can see, of course, over time, how many consignments have been rejected in one market. So it's a kind of cumulative data. And you can also see some trends in terms of increase or decrease, and also comparison between markets in terms of the number of consignments that have been rejected. It's a simple data. It does not tell us, for instance, whether the exports from India has increased or not. Sometimes the exports also from India increases, and therefore the rejections also increase. That doesn't mean the increase in the rejection always is because the compliance capacity has deteriorated. Maybe the exports has grown. So this data would not tell us this information, but it's a simple aggregate of the rejections. The next indicator is the unit rejection rate. So basically, in order to better understand the significance of the consignments that are rejected, we use this indicator. This is basically the number of consignments that they are rejected per every $1 million of export. So let's say a country has only 500,000 US dollar of export and has 1 rejection in that. That means the URR of that country would be 2 in 1 million US dollar. And we do that for every country and every group of products. And that's how we can compare the countries. Some countries, they have significant exports and rejections. Some countries have less exports and less rejections. In order to be able to compare these two, we calculate the unit rejection rate, which is, again, the number of rejected consignments per 1 million US dollar of exports. It is also presented in this form, so you can see, you will in the website, you can also see later on when you use it yourself, that there is a diagram where you have different markets presented in different colors, and you see Indonesia, for instance, within the income group, there is a comparison. So this line is the average of the upper middle income where Indonesia belongs. And here the lines are basically performance of Indonesia using the URR in each of these markets. For example, I believe green would be EU, then you have the orange, there is Australia, red is China. And here you can easily see that Indonesia is lower than the average of the income group that it belongs to. That is good. That means it's in comparison to the others is performing better. But in terms of within each of the markets, we can see that there is one market, for instance, the EU, that shows higher UR. So that means in that market, compliance has been more challenging. And in the one below, it has been less challenging. The next index is the relative rejection rate. And here's yet another index that is helping more with comparison. And here, how do we calculate the relative rejection rate? Basically, the relative rejection rate is a ratio of a country's share in the total rejection at the global level. So let's say globally, seafood, there has been, let's say globally, there has been in seafood sector, 1,000 rejections in 2022. Indonesia has had 20. That means Indonesia's share has been 2% in the global rejection, And then we look at the global trade of that product. And we say, for example, the trade has been also X $1 million, and Indonesia's share in that global trade has been 5%. And the RRR is then calculated as a ratio of the share in the rejection to the share in the total trade of that good. So you can see that this will tell us very accurately how countries compare to each other relative to their share of rejection and relative to their significance in terms of the exports. And it's presented in a box chart like that you would see that you have dots. Each of these dots are countries plotted for each of the markets vertically. And you have a tercile in the middle that are the median, basically. So these are the big middle. If a country has much higher RRR, that means it has higher rejection. That means it's performing worst. And if it is below the middle tercile, that means it has a lower rejection rate and therefore is performing better. And we can see from here that based on the RRR index, Indonesia has been consistently performing better than its average income group. In some cases, has been outperforming the average. As you see, it has become lower below the tercile, so it has been doing better. And in some cases, it's within. Lastly, another piece of information, interesting information, is the reasons for rejection. So all these consignments are rejected. Now we can dig a bit deeper and understand why have they been rejected. So this definition basically counts the frequency of the reasons for rejection over time. And it will tell us basically whether these rejections has been because of mycotoxins, because of additives, or because of labeling issues or lack of documentations. Each of them are a problem that can be addressed, but they can have different depths of issues. So for instance, here you can see that in the Australian market, the main reason for rejection has been labeling. And that's famous, the issue of labeling in Australia. And you can see it also here. Whereas in EU, the major problem has been mycotoxins. So one can easily also filter this based on the product group. So you can say on seafood, you can see what are the major reasons for rejection. That can help us also strategize when we want to develop a particular export capacity to a market. If, for example, Indonesia wants to target a specific product for the EU, then can look at this data also to the competitors to see where most of rejections are taking place, and therefore build the capacity in advance to meet those requirements. So I stop here. This was just an introduction to understand how do we do the analysis, what indexes do we use. I pass it on now to Dora, my colleague, to take you through a deep dive into the case of Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
From my side, or
I'm sorry?
Do you want me to share from my side, or you will do?
No, I'll share from my side, no problem. Thank you so much. Thank you so much also, Dr. Purnomo, for the lovely introduction. And without further ado, I would also be sharing my screen. Okay. Let me just get back to the correct screen. Okay, perfect. So I'll be going over this case study of Indonesia. So basically everything that Nima has covered in kind of in general terms, and going over every single index, we're going to now see what are the numbers for Indonesia. Perfect. So just a bit of context. I'm not going to linger here because I think it's been touched upon already in the introduction. But as it's been mentioned, Indonesia actually has a really, really strong export sector of food products. So we have crops such as palm oil, probably the flagship crop, cacao, seafood, coffee, seaweed. It also, however, imports as well a lot of food products. So it is a bit of a contrast there. So yeah, palm oil being the major export product for Indonesia. It's mostly exporting that to India, China, Pakistan, Spain, and Malaysia. And as far as in general, the main export destination, I think that's good to keep in context. We have the United States in 2020, it was China, the Philippines, Malaysia, the Netherlands, and Singapore. So it's important to really kind of keep that in mind because maybe we'll be more interested in rejections from the United States and China as opposed to the other markets, because those are the major markets that that are being exported to from Indonesia. So now if we look at the very first index we have, which is the aggregate rejection rate, you're going to see over the last decade that basically half of the rejections or so are coming from the US, which isn't too surprising. Not only it's a huge market for Indonesia, it's also quite stringent as far as food safety regulations go. The next numbers we have are from China, again, another major market, 20%. And then we have smaller amounts, 12% here in Australia, and a smaller share for Japan and the EU. And you can see the numbers overall have decreased significantly. So that's quite good because we know that over that period of time, exports, however, have increased. So the fact that rejections have decreased means there is a higher rate of compliance. So that's really good. And we're going to delve a bit deeper into this. Okay. Here, I'll let you look at this slide a bit more, but that's basically what I was just covering. For each market, try to find out overall how much it has decreased. And if there's any peak in the data, that's always interesting to see if maybe there was a new regulation came about, and then for that 1 year, rejections peaked because the market wasn't able to adapt quickly enough. Okay, the next indicator, which is a bit more interesting because now it takes into account not only the number of rejections overall, but also the number of exports, which means, as Nima has mentioned, now we really know that if the URR, the higher the URR, basically, the lower the compliance. So what we're trying to have is that to always be underneath that gray curve that you see. So that's the average for all the upper middle income countries. And Indonesia is quite interesting because it belonged before to the lower middle income group, but then in 2020, they reached upper middle income status. And that's why it's being compared now to relatively richer countries. But it's still doing quite well. As you can see, all of these colored curves are every time underneath the gray curve, which means it's outperforming on average in its income group, which is really good. And this is for the Australian and the Chinese market. Then we'll go and see in the US, in the European and the Japanese market is doing quite well. You can see in the Japanese is almost 0. And it's been also getting lower in the US market, which is good, better compliance, as well as the European market. I'll check. There you go. And it's been, as I said, stable, relatively decreasing in the American market. So that's good. Let's see. Now, the next indicator would be the relative rejection rate. And here, I don't have a screenshot of the little box plot that Nima was showing, but these are the numbers, basically. I think you've seen it briefly earlier. And here, what's interesting to see is that Indonesia is performing really, really well in the EU market. You can see its RRR is way lower than the median with negative 2.297. So it's really, really doing a great job at complying in that market. And you can see that it could use an improvement in the American market. It's still lower than the median, but relative to the other markets, it could still use a bit of a boost. And that's something to keep in mind, that in the American market, in the Japanese market, it could work a bit to improve that indicator. And in the Australian market, yeah, as well, that's even lower. So let's see. Now, this is the most, probably one of the most indicators we have, because now it's going to be able to kind of give you a starting point of where compliance is failing, really. So to go and kind of dig deeper and find out, is it, you know, conformity assessment bodies that are don't have the correct tests, they're not, maybe they're not following the more stringent kind of regulations, only the national ones, maybe not the ones required by that specific export market. So this is where we can see kind of the consequences a year after, to find out where were the rejections and how can we address those pain points. So here in the case of Indonesia, we've picked 2020 as the current last year we have in the data sets, and we're hoping to get more years as in the upcoming months. So in this case, the main causes of rejection for Indonesia, which represents 62% of overall rejections in 2020, were hygienic conditions and control, as well as bacterial contamination. And to a lower degree, additives and labeling. So this is an aggregate thing. This isn't really by market yet. Just to give you an idea, really, these are the two main areas: hygienic condition and control and bacterial contamination that Indonesia should be focused on. I think I have this in the report, not in the slides, maybe not to go overboard, but in the report, definitely there is by market for each of the 5 markets, where are the main challenges and where are the main reasons for rejections. So please refer to that to find out a bit more detailed answer. Next, as Nima had mentioned, so we have one category in the tool where you can compare your main country of focus with 2 other countries. And this kind of depends what question you're trying to answer. So in this case, we picked Vietnam and Malaysia as 2 comparative countries that export similar things, that are also geographically close and have similar trading partners, and just overall similar indicator economy-wise. As you can see, they have similar share of the agricultural sector, more or less, Human Development Index, etc., etc. So I think they're good comparative countries to see how are they doing. Maybe they're doing better in some areas. They're not getting rejections from that reason. Then you can see, you can kind of compare and go back and dig deeper and find out why are they doing better or worse in a certain area. Okay. So here, next, we're gonna kind of compare the aggregate rejection rate between Indonesia, Vietnam, and Malaysia. As you can see, let me just check a bit. Yeah, as you can see, the rate of US rejection has decreased in Indonesia. You can see it fluctuating quite a lot in Vietnam, So that's definitely an area to be addressed for Vietnam. Yeah, you can see in Indonesia in 2016 was the rate where it really peaked in China. And we have seen this actually in other countries as well, which leads me to think, I think around 2015 and 2016, this is when China made several trade agreements. And so the trade also really increased, and that's reflected by the rate of rejections increasing here in this indicator. As you can see for Malaysia, really China again dominates as far as which market is giving the most rejection from. Okay. So this is basically what I've been just covering. I'll just let you kind of read through for a bit, and why we focus really on the US and China, because for all three countries, these are really their major markets. So they're the ones that would be the most interesting to focus on. So even if they're getting another, let's say 20% in another market, such as, let's say, Australia, as long as they're not doing significant trade with that market, it's not as interesting. Although in the case of Indonesia, for example, Australia has a huge export potential. So I can see in the next few years that market being very important. So still a good idea to, ahead of the curve, keep an eye out on trying to comply as much as possible with the regulations there. And I think it's been mentioned before, but it's worth saying again, this isn't filtered by specific food group. Right now, I'm always filtering on HS 1 to 23, so all of the food codes. So this is for all food products. So you'll get different numbers and a different picture if you go to the tool and select it by fisheries, for example. Then you can kind of dig into more details into the product you're interested in. So this is the URR rate, as you can see, for all three countries. You can see Malaysia is probably outperforming the other two countries by a lot because their URR is close to 0 for all markets. And you see kind of a similar picture there between Indonesia and Vietnam. Yeah, very similar picture actually, number-wise, as you can see. That's always good to see. Okay. So yeah, as mentioned before, Indonesia URR for the 5 markets range between 0.02 to 0.2, similar to Malaysia's performance. Vietnam has a comparable performance, although it belongs to a different income group. So it's being compared to a different really set of data and different group, which is the lower middle income countries. We can see indeed that Indonesia's URR curves has fluctuated a bit more than Vietnam and Malaysia, which means the performance wasn't as stable. That's maybe something to look into. But overall, for all 5 markets and for all 3 countries, the URR curve has been decreasing, which means the overall rate of non-compliance as well has been decreasing. Okay. Now for the next indicator, the relative rejection rate indicator. So this indicator, as mentioned before, is comparing really Indonesia's performance, and in this case, Vietnam and Malaysia's performance, with all of the other countries that are trading for that product group. So it's not by income group level. This is just overall all of the countries that we have data for. Here we go. So here we've said it before, Indonesia's RRR is always lower than the median in each market. So it's performing better on average. However, in the case, for example, of the Australian market, you'll see a better performance from both Vietnam and Malaysia. Whereas in the European market, Indonesia is by far outperforming the other 2 countries. And in the Chinese market, similarly, Indonesia is also outperforming them, which is really good. So I think here the conclusion would be that Indonesia could aim to improve its performance in the American market and kind of follow the lead of Malaysia, who has really good numbers in that market, as well as in the Australian market, which, as I mentioned, would be an interesting market to look out for in the future. Okay, here we go. Now, reasons for rejection. So you'll see in the different pie charts, every country has its own kind of major reason of rejections, which are slightly different from one to the other. Here you can see that bacterial contamination, which, let me check what color that is. I think, yeah, this dark blue color is quite high for all three countries, between 17 to 29% of the total rejections, with Indonesia having the highest at 29% and Vietnam having 22 and Malaysia 17. So, and these high numbers for bacterial contamination can be noted in the US, the Chinese, and the Japanese market. So a reason really to keep in mind that's a problem for all three countries is this bacterial contamination. Hygienic condition also comes in really high. For Indonesia, it's 33% of rejection. For Vietnam, it's 18%. However, for Malaysia, they could learn and use the example of Malaysia on how to reduce rejection due to hygienic conditions, because it's only 4% of rejection for Malaysia. For Malaysia, the main challenge remains with labeling, which is about a third of all of its rejections. I think labeling here is it's this pink color. As you can see, it's about a third of rejections for Malaysia. Okay. All right. So I'm going to continue on. These indicators are very interesting, and so is the analysis for the data. But really what's much more interesting would be now, how do we put it in context? How do we really provide maybe some solutions, some recommendations, some idea on how to improve the overall quality infrastructure landscape in Indonesia? And this is where the next hour will be much more interesting than my presentation, I'm sure, which is really getting your input and your feedback on what have you seen in the field, what have you seen, whether you're from the public sector or you're a food exporter or the private sector, what have been your main challenges? So here I'm just giving a handful of recommendations. There's a few more in the report, so I didn't put all of them in here. But here we go. So one of the ideas would be to develop a food control index using a conceptual framework that will align with the FAO and the WHO's guidelines. So the aim would be to be used as a basis for policy interventions to improve food security. The other recommendation would be for the National Quality Policy, the acronym JAKNAS, should be quickly established and implemented so that we ensure harmonization and strong implementation of quality infrastructure in Indonesia. I think this is currently, from what I researched, it's been finalized by the BSN and hoping to be issued very soon. Skip. Oh, yeah, I'm talking a different slide. All right. Going back a couple of steps back, straight from the analysis, I'm sorry. The recommendation would be based on our analysis right now. I'll start with that. We have noted that a particular effort should be made in the US market because it's one of Indonesia's largest export market, and it's representing half of all of Indonesia's rejections. The next market that should be really focused on is the Chinese market. It accounts for 20% of all rejections over the 2010 to 2020 period. And it has had this really big peak we saw in 2016. The other thing we noted is that we should pay attention as well to rejections in the Australian market because it has a high export potential to Australia due to its location close to Indonesia. And the RRR value showed us that the compliance of Indonesia with the food safety regulations in Australia could be improved. As for the reasons of rejection, Indonesia should really focus on the two main reasons we've uncovered, which are bacterial contamination and hygienic conditions and control. In the US market, the main reasons were hygienic condition and control, followed by, again, bacterial contamination. So they're the exact same. In the Chinese market, however, it was additive for a third of the reasons, bacterial contamination and labeling. So I think those are the reasons we should keep in mind. Okay, I think I've mentioned now the other recommendations. Another recommendation would be to ensure that the appropriate authorities and processes are in place to be able to do a full traceback and like a traceability investigation to identify the point of origin and root cause of the food safety problems associated with fish and seafood products, one of the major export products we're interested in. Another recommendation would be to establish a clearinghouse of information that can detail all the non-trade measure related procedures and food safety regulations, as well as having help desk services that can provide, especially SMEs, small, medium enterprises, trying to export a particular product to one of the global market. So if you have this kind of database that's accessible online or data warehouse that can constantly be updated with that latest information, having in one place all the food safety regulations that if you're a small SME, you're trying to follow, and there's so many of them in so many different markets, that would be very helpful because standards and regulations are being updated constantly, and it's really hard if you're exporting to more than one market, which probably is the aim, for you to follow up with all these fast changing regulations. We also have as Indonesia's halal law was passed in 2014, and is stating that many products starting in October 2019 would be subjected to a certification process and labeling requirements that would certify that they're halal. Okay, yeah. So the overall recommendation for this is overall to have the financial and logistical support to the halal food producers should be provided in order to allow them to participate in global agricultural affairs and to access this way a new global market. So we want to be able to increase the value and image of the Indonesian certified halal brand. And yeah, there's I think a huge business potential for there because that could be exported to a lot of other markets. I think we've touched upon traceability before, but what's interesting is now we know that the US, Japan, and China are currently at various stages of establishing both public and private regulations and frameworks for seafood traceabilities. So it's going to be very interesting for Indonesia to be able to find out how it can best implement the traceability requirements throughout its seafood value chain. And an example of why this is really important is that, for example, in the case of tuna exported from Indonesia, the value of rejection by major importing countries like the US, the EU, and Japan was about 3.15 million per year, which is about 4% of the total value of tuna exported. So as you can see, this is really costly, this sort of rejection for Indonesia. So it's really important to find out how it can improve this traceability process and thereby reduce losses due to rejection from these major markets. Here we go. Okay, one of the last recommendations. Oh my God, I've gone over time. Huh? Okay, I'll just, I think, close here with the last recommendation, which is for smallholders who find it difficult to meet food safety standards and good agricultural practices due to their economic circumstances, having a cluster approach, so collaboration between them, would be practical and cost effective. So figuring out a way to train like this large number of farmers in the use of good agricultural practice, providing them with incentive, financial or otherwise, to be able to pursue certification, instructing them on the use of chemicals, etc. So this is another one of the recommendation. And I think I will not be covering the very last recommendations. As to not run out of time, I'd rather we use the time more in a better way in finding out your input and your feedback. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions and feedback.
Thank you, Dora. Yes, actually, I have some questions here, but according to the schedule, I should have give the priority to some reviewers from the institutions that I have on the list. Firstly, I would like to have a response from Ibu Ernawati, Ministry of Trade. She's the head of Working Task for Refreshing Ingredient Plants and Spices, Directorate for Export of Agriculture and Forestry Products. I hope she's still here. Ibu Ernawati. Ibu Ernawati masih ada? Silakan.
Ya.
Ibu Ernawati, ya.
Baik, terima kasih atas kesempatan yang diberikan kepada kami, Pak Ahmad. Mungkin kami karena waktunya ya Pak ya, mungkin kami hanya akan memberikan sedikit tanggapan, mungkin terkait adanya kendala ekspor komoditi asal Indonesia ini ke beberapa negara, dalam hal ini Amerika Serikat, Uni Eropa, Jepang, Australia. Sebagai contohnya Pak, adanya pelanggaran Undang-Undang Sanitasi Pangan Jepang oleh biji kopi asal Indonesia, yaitu terkait dengan kandungan isoprocrap sebesar 0,03 ppm, di mana menurut ketentuan ambang batas maksimalnya adalah 0,01 ppm. Kemudian produk kopi Indonesia masih dikenakan wajib sampling untuk pengujian di laboratorium otoritas pemerintah Jepang untuk menguji kandungan isoprocrap dengan kandungan maksimal 0,01 ppm ini, Pak. Kemudian akhirnya semua produk kopi dari Indonesia harus lulus 100% inspection order karena ditemukan lebih dari satu perusahaan yang mengandung isoprocrap di atas batas maksimum residu. Dalam hal ini pemerintah Indonesia sungguhnya Kemendak telah melakukan koordinasi dengan kementerian lembaga terkait. Akhirnya kami telah melakukan tindakan korektif untuk mengurangi kandungan isoprocrap, antara lain dengan menyusun good agriculture practices dan good manufacturing practices, kemudian adanya pendampingan dan pembinaan petani, kemudian untuk menggunakan pestisida nabati, serta mendaftarkan laboratorium di Indonesia yang terakreditasi untuk pengujian isoprocrap tersebut. Dalam hal ini sudah ada 18 laboratorium yang sudah diakreditasi oleh pemerintah Jepang. Barangkali salah satu contohnya seperti itu. Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih Ibu. Tadi tentang kopi, Bu, ya, di Jepang ya?
Iya, Pak.
Baik. Terima kasih Ibu Ernawati. Selanjutnya, ini saya akan list dulu satu persatu, yang lainnya nanti menyusul ya. Dari
ini
Pak...
izin Pak, tambahan dari perdagangan Pak. Boleh Pak Purnomo?
Saya kasih waktu sebentar saja ya, karena ini dari daftarnya Ade Chandra. Silakan Pak.
Oh ya, saya ada perdagangan juga.
Ini dari mana Pak?
Perdagangan, sama dengan Bu Erna.
Direkturat
saya
apa Pak?
diundang di Direktorat Fasilitasi.
Ya.
The first name ya. Boleh Pak?
Ya, silakan, jangan lama-lama Pak.
Okay, thank you. I'm not really a reviewer, but I'm a questioner. First of all, I would like to say thank you for the invitation and actually Bu Erna already speak, but I'm focused on the report Bu ya, Ibu Dora and Pak Nima. Thank you for presentation, very clear. I am directly to raise my comment and question. First, in table 2, some rejection data show us consistently decreasing, such in US. Can it caused by improvement standard of export food products year by year in Indonesia? So I think you don't explain in your analyzing there. And also, actually, I have much a question and a suggestion. Yeah? And the data change in up and down in some cases. I'm curious. There's also exists the change of regulation in destination countries. Maybe Bu Erna already told. We have experience in 2014 for the tea product, our export to EU. That we experience on rejection because of the standard made of EU. They lowers the standard of contamination. So our export of tea to EU decreased very sharply on that time. So this is, I think, this you also can analyze on that data because not just in our country, the problem also in the destination country, you can put also analyzing. So on some cases, I see also the data that in table 2 and table 4, Ibu Dora, there's a difference in total. So can you explore more on that? Because in total, it's different in both tables. We compare table 2 and table 4. Thank you. Thank you, Pak Purnomo.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Martin. Kemudian saya persilakan Pak Chandra dari Kepala Biro Kerjasama Luar Negeri Kementerian Pertanian. Apakah
Baik.
masih ada?
Ada Pak, siap.
Nah, silakan Pak.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Ahmad. First of all, I would like to convey our appreciation to UNIDO for the comprehensive analysis on the Indonesian compliance standard. My appreciation also echoing to what Pak Martin just mentioned to Nima and Dora. Congratulations for the concise and nice presentation that guided me in particular to follow the whole idea of the study that you have done. One is that we are happy to note that between 2010 to 2020, generally there has been an improvement in the compliance of Indonesian agricultural product to some market, particularly like Japan, China, USA, EU, Australia. And then if I may say, I would confirm this because this is very much in line with what we have already done here within the Ministry of Agriculture. Of course, to help our export here, to comply their standard requirement with the export destinating countries. Like we did create a closer collaboration with quarantine agencies, like with China, Australia, United States, just to make sure that any regulation they impose to agricultural product also being conveyed to the producers, because this is very important to ensure that the production practices we made could comply with the standard requirement. So at the same time, we are also working with our farmers on how to improve their quality standard in order to match with the standard requirement. And then I do also note here that those factors that create rejection include, like the first part is hygiene condition or control, which account for around 33%. And I think it's also personally I would confirm it, because though I have not had a complete data, but based on some notification that we received here in our bureau, major rejection is due to control and hygiene. And again, we did a lot to improve this condition, and we are working in close collaboration with all the companies dealing with the export of agricultural commodities. And similarly with the other factors like bacterial, additive, and also labeling. And in comparison, the performance of Indonesia with Malaysia, Vietnam, and other countries, let's say in Tiongkok, when Indonesia, performing well in comparison to other countries. I think this is also one of it is due to our, close collaboration that we have been made with quarantine agency GACC in Tiongkok. And my question is if you could also share with us the detailed data, like dealing with the detail, the HS code of those commodities that has been rejected. So at least we could also recheck which commodities that we should work in more intensive with our producer farmers. And then the second point is I do notice that the standard of importation from various countries is very much dynamic. It's linked with, let's say, the development of innovation and technology. The more innovation and technology, the more stringent the standard will be made. So meaning that if this study could also, projected the trend of the standard. So we from the producing countries here, we could also, anticipate what kind of innovation and technology that we have to catch up in order to improve, the quality standard of our product, and then could match with the dynamic of the standard that has been imposed by the export destinating countries. And I think that's all the thing that I could, give right now. If you could share the complete report, then I will do review more comprehensive, and then perhaps later on we could also, submit to you more detailed comment on the whole report. Thank you, Pak Ahmad. I give back the screen to you. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Ade. Dora Enima, Pak Ade, Dr. Ade Chandra Wijaya is the head of International Cooperation Bureau of the Ministry of Agriculture. Now let me ask Ibu Ulima from Directorate of International Industry.
Ya, selamat siang Bapak. Izin apakah terdengar suaranya Pak?
Ya.
Selamat siang Bapak.
From the Ministry of Industry.
Ya, betul. Terima kasih Bapak atas kesempatannya. Izin Bapak, saya mewakili Bapak Direktur yang kebetulan pada saat ini ada agenda lain. Pertama-tama saya ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada UNIDO dan juga KKP atas undangannya kepada kami untuk menghadiri forum diskusi siang ini. Lalu juga sangat mengapresiasi UNIDO atas penyusunan kajiannya dan berupa draft laporan yang telah di-share sebelumnya yang sangat komprehensif dan tentunya sangat membantu kami dalam menganalisa langkah-langkah selanjutnya dalam membuka akses pasar produk-produk bahari Indonesia. Adapun apabila dapat kami sampaikan beberapa masukan dan catatan yang kiranya bisa dapat ditambahkan di dalam laporan untuk meningkatkan komprehensif dari laporan itu sendiri adalah yang pertama, sebagaimana yang tadi telah disebutkan oleh Bapak Chandra sebelumnya, kiranya dapat diidentifikasi produk-produk HS code mana saja yang dilakukan penolakan oleh masing-masing negara agar kami juga dapat langsung menindaklanjuti kepada teman-teman di sektor terkait. Seperti itu Bapak. Lalu terkait dengan rekomendasi mengenai kebijakan fiskal dan non-fiskal, kiranya juga pemberian insentif tidak hanya diberikan kepada para petani atau pembudidaya saja, namun juga dapat diberikan kepada para industri pengolahan, terutama IKM. Lalu untuk diperhatikan terkait dengan rencana pembangunan dan pembentukan pusat-pusat pemberian bantuan kepada industri yang terkait, karena saat ini seperti yang diketahui kita sudah memiliki beberapa pusat atau lembaga yang memberikan informasi maupun bantuan terkait perdagangan dan kerjasama luar negeri seperti misalkan FTA Center dan pusat-pusat layanan IKM dan UMKM. Oleh karena itu perlu diperhatikan ke depannya pembangunan pusat informasi yang baru apakah akan overlapping atau tidak dengan yang sudah ada. Terakhir, mengingat bahwa Direktorat Akses Industri Internasional merupakan national focal point dari kerjasama Indonesia dan UNIDO, kami harap bahwa UNIDO dapat terus mengeksplor kemungkinan-kemungkinan kajian ke depannya terkait dengan berbagai produk nasional sehingga dapat memperluas dan meningkatkan akses produk global. Terima kasih Bapak, selamat siang semuanya.
Ya, selamat siang. Terima kasih. So she's asked about what type of product that were rejected and included in the analysis. That's from Ibu Ulina, Ministry of Industry. And next one is from the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Affairs and Fisheries. We have Pak Erwin Dwiana, the Director of Marketing, and then Pak Agus Santoso from the from the Quality and Inspection Service. Pak Edwin, masih ada Pak Erwin?
Sudah tidak
Atau
ada
Pak Agung?
Pak, sepertinya. It seems.
Pak Agung ada from quarantine?
Yeah,
Fish
we do
quarantine
have Pak
inspection? Pak Agung? Okay, we can skip now. If we are here, then we can go back to them, give them a chance again. Now we have the.
I think Pak Ipung, Pak Erwin is not available, but he asked Ibu Hanif to represent him. Yeah, Ibu Hanif is there. Yeah.
Ibu Hanif.
Hanif,
Ya, Bu Hanif.
Ibu Hanif.
Hanifah. Ibu Hanif, Hanif.
Not there.
Halo. Hello, maybe Ibu Ita can seek or contact her again. While now I will give the chance to Indonesian Food and Drug Authority, Badan POM.
Pak Ipung izin Pak Ipung, Agung Pak
Pak
Ipung dari
Oh Agung
Argentina.
ya, tadi sudah dipanggil ya Agung.
Yeah.
She's from the quarantine inspection, fish quarantine and inspection from the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. Silakan Pak Agung.
Iya, mohon maaf Pak Ipung tadi baru saya buka meet-nya. Terima kasih saya ucapkan ini kepada UNIDO dan Ibu Dora dan Pak Nipa atas presentasinya yang sangat baik. Mungkin dalam kesempatan ini saya ingin menyampaikan terkait dengan penolakan produk seafood ke dari negara tujuan ekspor Indonesia, dan di dalam kegiatan ekspor hasil perikanan Indonesia ada kewajiban untuk perusahaan Fish Processing Unit untuk menerapkan sistem jaminan mutu dan keamanan hasil perikanan, sehingga setiap ekspor hasil perikanan itu harus didasarkan pada prinsip-prinsip HACCP terkait dengan mutu dan keamanan pangan yang aman untuk dikonsumsi oleh konsumen, baik untuk kepentingan domestik maupun internasional. Nah, terkait dengan rejection, bahwa kita juga di Badan Karantina ini sudah mempunyai sistem ketika ada penolakan produk dari produk hasil perikanan khususnya dari negara tujuan ekspor, maka kami akan melakukan investigasi untuk mencari akar permasalahan penyebab kasus tersebut, dan kita harapkan dari kegiatan investigasi tersebut perusahaan bisa meningkatkan performanya dalam sistem jaminan mutu, dan sehingga ini pun akan sangat membantu perusahaan dalam meningkatkan sistem jaminan mutunya. Nah, mungkin yang ingin kami konfirmasi adalah yang menjadi permasalahan adalah memang tidak semua mungkin penolakan produk hasil perikanan dari negara tujuan itu terinformasikan kepada kami. Kami sementara ini mendapatkan informasi resmi dari beberapa negara tujuan ekspor yang sudah mempunyai kerjasama dengan Indonesia dalam bentuk MOU atau MRE, ataupun dari informasi seperti dari Infosan, ataupun dari Indonesian Rapid Alert Food and Feed yang sudah dikembangkan oleh kolega kami di Badan POM. Nah, mungkin permasalahannya mungkin ada penolakan yang mungkin tidak diinformasikan atau tidak terinformasikan kepada kami, karena bisa jadi penolakan itu sudah dilakukan penyelesaian di negara tujuannya, misalnya seperti dimusnahkan sehingga tidak dilaporkan. Itu mungkin jadi data-data itu yang mungkin masih menjadi permasalahan yang perlu mendapatkan mungkin solusinya gitu. Itu mungkin Pak Ipung, terima kasih atas kesempatan yang diberikan. Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Agung. Dora and Nima, basically the fisheries product should undergo the process for quality and safety measures in Indonesia, which meet the standards in the important countries. But again, there's one question, or probably one problem that he is telling us, is that not all the rejected products are informed to them, especially the ones who are destroyed in the importing countries. So probably if there is some information that you can share with us. Baik, berikutnya adalah, sabar saya cari dulu, Pak Erwin sudah ada?
Bu Hanif belum bisa dihubungi juga, Pak.
Baik, kalau gitu saya berikan kepada Badan POM, Indonesian Food and Drug Authority. Ibu Neni ada?
Ada, Bapak.
Hadir, Bapak.
Silakan.
Ya. Suara saya jelas terdengar ya, Pak?
Ya, silakan. Ya, Bu Neni ya.
Baik.
Kalau pakai bahasa Inggris.
Saya bahasa Indonesia aja ya, Pak.
Oh ya.
Oke, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore. Atas acara ini kami sangat berterima kasih sekali Pak Ahmad Purnomo atau Pak Ipung ya. Tadi saya dengar namanya, salam kenal Bapak. Dan Bapak Ibu semuanya. Terima kasih juga buat Miss Dora atas paparannya, atas kajian yang dilakukan terhadap produk-produk Indonesia yang mengalami penolakan dari beberapa negara tujuan ekspor kita gitu ya. Nah tadi sebenarnya teman-teman atau Bapak Ibu dari seluruh Kementerian Lembaga sudah menyampaikan dan sangat lengkap sekali bahwa sebenarnya sungguhnya bahwa Indonesia untuk dukungan ekspor ini sangat-sangat sama semangatnya gitu Pak. Dan untuk ekspor ini pun kita senantiasa berusaha gitu, berupaya untuk mengantisipasi agar tidak ada penolakan gitu ya. Namun itu mungkin tidak bisa dihindari gitu, karena terkadang ada ekspor paralel juga yang tidak dibawa oleh produsen resmi atau eksportir resmi sebenarnya. Jadi mungkin itu yang tersampling sehingga kemudian tidak memenuhi syarat gitu ya, sehingga akhirnya ditolaklah produk tersebut. Karena kalau yang memang dibawa oleh eksportir biasanya memang mereka berusaha untuk memenuhi regulasi negara tujuan, kemudian baru bisa ekspor produk mereka, karena pasti mereka juga tidak mau produknya ditolak di satu negara gitu ya, karena akan mencemari nama baik Indonesia dan juga produsen itu sendiri. Nah, untuk kami dari Badan POM Pak, sebelum ekspor kami melakukan evaluasi terlebih dahulu terhadap keamanan dan mutu dari produk yang akan diekspor. Untuk itu kami menerbitkan namanya surat keterangan ekspor atau bisa disebut health certificate atau certificate of resale. Dan kami dalam hal ini mengawal dan menghimbau selalu, mengingatkan selalu kepada eksportir kita agar berhati-hati. Walaupun kita ekspor ini pasti kita akan dukung sekali gitu ya, tapi untuk berangkat itu kita hati-hati. Pastikan produk yang akan diekspor sesuai dengan regulasi negara tujuan, gitu ya. Nah, Begitu juga dengan sarana produksinya. Tadi kan ada temuan untuk Indonesia, misalnya hygiene-nya gitu ya, kemudian cemaran-cemaran mikrobanya gitu. Sebenarnya Indonesia juga mengawal dari mulai seluruh rantai pangannya gitu, dari mulai penyiapan bahan baku, kemudian proses produksi, distribusi, sampai ekspor pun itu kita kawal. Namun memang jikalau memang tetap ada temuan, itu yang harus kita tindak lanjuti. Nah, kami sangat terima kasih sekali, apresiasi data tadi yang disampaikan, sangat membantu sekali sebenarnya buat kita untuk menindaklanjuti. Namun, kami berharap datanya bisa lebih diberikan detailnya. Tadi kalau nggak salah saya lihat bercampur pangan dan pakan gitu. Jadi, kalau boleh kami Badan POM karena mengawasi pangan olahan, kami bisa dapat data penolakan tersebut khusus untuk pangan olahan. Nah, akan lebih baik lagi kalau perusahaannya diberitahu gitu. Jadi kita bisa menindaklanjuti sampai tuntas ke sarananya, sehingga harapan kita ke depan tidak terulang kembali penolakan ekspor tersebut. Gitu Bapak, kami harapkan kalau boleh datanya dapat kita terima lebih detail, produknya apa saja, kemudian produsennya atau ekspornya siapa, sehingga kita bisa lakukan seperti halnya kita memperoleh BRAFAX gitu ya, atau notifikasi terkait penolakan. Kita butuh data tersebut untuk bisa menindaklanjuti. Kalau tidak, kita tidak bisa jadinya menindaklanjuti untuk mencegah pengulangan penolakan ekspor tersebut. Dan kemudian juga kami ingin menyampaikan bahwa tadi berbagai penyebab adanya penolakan disampaikan oleh Miss Dora. Namun kami tidak melihat adanya terkait yang akhir-akhir ini kita sama-sama tahu ada kasus tentang penolakan ekspor karena residu pestisida. Nah, itu apakah Miss Dora atau UNIDO belum konsen terhadap hal tersebut gitu Pak. Kalau memang nanti akan ada lagi kajian, kami mengusulkan bisa dikaji juga karena hal ini merupakan emerging issue Pak. Jadi baru, sehingga mungkin bisa kita gali juga informasi dari berbagai negara tujuan ekspor atau berbagai negara di dunia ini, mana-mana yang memang telah menerapkan terkait dengan residu pestisida tersebut gitu, mempersyaratkan bahwa harus diuji produknya gitu kan, atau tidak, supaya kita juga bisa mengantisipasi nih. Karena cukup mahal Pak ternyata Pak pengujiannya. Jadi kalau memang negara tersebut tidak mempersyaratkan, berarti kan aman tuh kita ekspor ke sana. Khawatirnya kita ekspor tapi dia mempersyaratkan kita nggak tahu, itu juga bahaya. Itu sih Pak yang bisa kami sampaikan, dan kembali kami terima kasih juga kepada panitia atas acara ini. Terima kasih banyak. Di sini juga ada teman saya Betty, kalau memang ada yang mau ditambahkan mungkin nanti bisa ditambahkan Bapak. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Itu health certificate dari Badan POM itu untuk semua pangan ya, kecuali ikan.
Pangan olahan Bapak?
Ya, kecuali ikan ya, kecuali pangan ikan olahan ya.
Kalau kita sih terima, kalau memang diminta dari Badan POM kita tetap bisa keluarkan juga. Oke.
Okay, now she is from the Indonesian Food and Drug Authority, and the authority of course look after the implementation of all aspects in food safety and quality in this case. And there is one inquiry: is the data that you have analyzed include feed or only food? Because the HS is the Carmona system is food and feed, right? So maybe you can clarify later on. And also, is there any data on rejection because of pesticide residue included in the analysis? Okay, thank you. Maybe later on you can give some information or explanation. Now let's go to next guest from the association, Indonesian Food and Beverage Union or Association. We have Pak Johan Mulyawan, the head of International Policy Section of the Union. Pak Johan Mulyawan ada?
Will be
izin?
represented by Pak Iwan and Ibu Lena, Pak Ipung.
Yes.
Oke, Pak
Iya.
Iwan. Silakan sebutkan
Ya,
Pak Iwan
Bu
bagian
Lena.
apa di asosiasi di gabungan.
Bu Lena yang
Lena,
akan
ya,
menjawab,
silakan.
Pak. Iya, silakan Bu.
Oke, ya. Selamat sore. Selamat sore Pak Ahmad. Saya Lena Prawira, saya dengan Pak Iwan dan Pak Johan dari GAPMI, kami dari Komite Kerjasama Luar Negeri. First of all, I would like to thank you. We would like to thank you to UNIDO, especially Ms. Dora and Mr. Nima, as for the comprehensive study about the rejection. That data we have reviewed together, and we are happy that it shows the improvement of Indonesian export in terms of the rejection. One thing from us, from GAPMI, is that we will, it's really highly appreciated if the data can be categorized by HS number. Why? Because in Indonesia, the products exported are under different ministry. As mentioned by BPOM, Indonesian FDA, BPOM is managing the food process products. And for the fresh products are under, for fisheries under fishery ministry, and for the, let's say, the spices, agriculture products under the agriculture minister. So is the association, GAPMI only for the food process product. So yeah, will be better if the study or the data can be categorized by HS number. That's one thing. And the other thing is that, as mentioned by Ibu Neni from Indonesian FDA, for food processed products, there are many cases that the products is exported by maybe diaspora or by some exporters that do not understand that about labeling. So there are many cases that the products are rejected because of the labeling does not meet the that destination country's regulation. Many cases of this. So that's one thing. Maybe if your study can also see this, would be very helpful for us to also to make more improvement from our members as the food processors. That's one thing from me. Maybe Pak Iwan can also add some more. Thank you.
Thank you, Bu Lena. Yeah, Pak Ahmad, I just added in the way of analysis how to read the report. I read the report in two ways. First, I see all the barriers from non-tariff already reported comprehensively. So our response for this, we improve our facility to achieve all the compliance indicator already shown by the graphics. But for the future report, hopefully, after so many ratification in CEPA, mostly is about tariff. Now we don't have any more tariff barrier to Japan, US, Europe as well, Australia too. So for the next report, hopefully will be improved because we now got incentive. We have zero tariff exported to the big destination country. Itu Pak review kami Pak Ahmad. Jadi report ini banyak fokus di non-tarif barrier, sementara kombinasi tarif dan non-tarif diharapkan juga dapat dipahami bersama bahwa fishery dan horticulture produk kita sekarang ini sudah zero tarif setelah ratifikasi banyak CEPA. Terima kasih Pak Ahmad.
Ya, oke. Thank you, Pak Iwan. Right, so it's all about non-tariff barrier, ya. Nah, last but not least, I think we have Ibu Hanif from the Fish Quarantine and Inspection of the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. Mana Bu Hanif? Ya, silakan. Oh ya, ini Khonifah ini. Silakan. Silakan di mikrofonnya. Mikrofonnya dinyalakan. Oke, silakan. Silakan. Ini. Nyalakan dulu mikrofonnya.
Di-unmute dulu, Bu.
Nah, silakan.
Baik, Pak Ipung dan Bapak Ibu, mohon izin tadi agak skip sebentar karena kebetulan kami ada 2 rapat sedang berlangsung. Mohon izin terkait isu karantin Pak Ipung ya, mohon maaf.
Jangan dianalogikan kita yang kita lakukan dari Jakarta. Tapi karena yang nanti baru, apa yang harus kita lakukan?
Ya, suaranya dari teman-temannya itu masuk kemari. Silakan.
Oh, baik Pak, sebentar saya keluar ruangan dulu Pak Ipung, nanti mungkin saya memberikan masukan lebih lanjut biar tidak terganggu suaranya. Mohon maaf sebentar. Saya keluar ruangan sebentar.
Okay. She is looking for peaceful room, quieter room, so that there's no interference with or from her friends. Okay, Ibu Dara and Pak Nima, if you have any response from the reviewer while waiting for Khonifah.
Sure. Thank you very much, Pak Purnomo, and thanks a lot for the very interesting comments that we received. I've taken note of all of them. So some of them that I may not be able to address now will be reflected certainly in the report. But let me try to address a few of them. I think one issue is related to the regulatory impact. In fact, a lot of rejections that we see is a direct result of change in the regulatory aspects. I think in the chat also we saw some indications of the new regulations coming into force. So that does not show that there is lack of compliance as a problem, but that shows that the trade relations are evolving all the time, and the rules of the game are evolving all the time. So it's not really enough to be able to meet the requirements now. It's important to meet the requirements of tomorrow. That is a very important, I think, feedback, and we fully agree with that. And in order to measure completely the regulatory impact, there needs to be monitoring of these changes in the regulation. The SCA does not do that. This tool does not do the review of the regulations, but it's a very important aspect that came up. A very interesting feedback that we received from Pak Kendra, I think, if I'm not wrong, he mentioned that there are closer collaboration between the Indonesian authorities and the Chinese and US customs. That is exactly the point, I think, that is also the intention of the SCA. to bring closer to the attention of the exporters, to the government, to the institutions, the requirements in the export market. And from there to understand better how capacities could be built, how agriculture practices can be adjusted to meet those requirements. So I think that's a very interesting point that was raised, and I think this should be reflected also in the Strandar's analytics report, this approach, because we see indeed the reduction in decrease in the rejections from Indonesia, and of course there are reasons for that, and that could be one of the reasons, this closer collaboration with the importing markets. What is also important also to understand the limitations of this data. We are looking at only countries who are exporting. We are looking only at the products that got exported. And we are looking at also a sample of the exported goods that were tested and they got rejected. So it really is a tip of an iceberg. It may not be, it's not statistics that we look at it as a solid source of information and knowledge, but it helps us to see the tip of the iceberg, to see where the problems, especially where those are systematic problems, lie. For instance, when we see rejections over the 10 years in particular market, in particular sector, then we can see that there is a problem, there is a challenge. Sometimes spikes in rejection would not mean much in terms of compliance capacity. This is more related to regulation changes. But when we see systematic or consistent problem, there's an issue. So what I want to mention is that this data should be seen within the larger context. And one of the reasons of having this workshop is to better contextualize this data, not by providing the prophecy of saying, because of these rejections, there's a problem in Indonesia. No, this has to be looked at in the context. And in terms of the type of products and the level of analysis, I will take a couple of minutes to take you to the tool that is also in the chat now. I think we will address some of the questions. With respect to what are the, let's say, reasons for rejection, these are basically all NTM, the SPS and TBT. There, so we do not have, for instance, let's say, voluntary standards, sustainability standards looked at. I think we had a comment related to deforestation or deforestation zero agriculture, which is a new regulation now coming in the EU, and indeed it will impact the export competitiveness from Indonesia. But those are not reflected in this SCA because these are voluntary standards for the time being. So that is also another limitation of this data, if you like, that it does not include those. But in general, I think similarly was a question about traceability. And the point is that many of these standards that they are at the beginning, sustainability standards or private standards, eventually they will become regulations. So what we could see, for example, the trend in seafood industry, many of the elements of sustainability has become already regulations. And it can be seen that in the next few years, the Green Deal in the EU will put sustainability as a technical regulation requirement for import. So the answer to that in general is yes. I think these are in fact points that should be considered now in order to proactively address the compliance issues. And traceability and sustainability are specifically some of those. And when it comes to, for example, palm oil, deforestation zero palm oil is going to certainly be a requirement in the market. If it's not now, in the next few years, it will be one can say with some degree of certainty. So I hope I addressed some of them. I just take you through the platform just to show basically some of the answers I will try to address on the platform. So let me share my screen with you. I hope you see my window now. So basically, you can go
Not
to,
yet.
not
Well,
yet.
what I can see is you. Nima.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we can
Now,
see.
yes, yes.
Now you see. Okay, it takes some time, I think, to come up. So what I'm showing you is basically the standards compliance analytics website, where you could freely access, and you can look into the data that is interesting for you. One level of analysis is the global analysis, where you can basically see the world map, and you can filter the report that you would like to see. For instance, you want to see in 2016 in the EU market, or I think there was a in the US market. Let's look at the EU, and in terms of what type of products you're interested in. You can select HS1 until 23, which includes all food and feed, or you can select a particular product that you're interested in. For example, I think fisheries came up as a interesting product for Indonesia. And you can also select the reasons for rejection. So you want to see, for example, in terms of bacterial contamination, what has been the performance of Indonesia. So once you select your criteria, you get the world report. And here we use the relative rejection rate to compare the countries. And the more solid the color, or the
We lost you, Nima.
Hello, Nima. Hello. Okay, Dora, I think Nima is missing somewhere. If we can hear now, Ibu Hanifah from the Ministry of Marine Affairs can add some comments first before you respond for the questions. Silakan, Hanifah. Nyalakan dulu mikrofonnya. Ya. Nyalakan lagi, tetap pencet itu.
Oke, siap.
Ya, sudah.
Oke. Ya, baik. Terima kasih Pak Ibu dan Bapak Ibu. Mohon maaf, agak ada banyak trouble. Ya, ini kami coba merespon beberapa hal yang terkait penolakan ekspor produk perikanan Indonesia ke pasar global. Dapat kami sampaikan bahwa sebenarnya KKP sudah melakukan beberapa hal, termasuk yang beberapa hal baik formal maupun informal, pendekatan formal dan informal, termasuk yang terakhir kemarin, yang terbaru pada bulan Juni pada sidang Coffee on Trade. Sebentar saya bacakan laporannya. Pada sidang Coffee di Bali, sidang secara virtual di Bali, kita menyampaikan masukan untuk isu food safety and quality for fisheries and aquaculture products. Itu kita bersama beberapa negara yang lain, termasuk Norway, Kanada, dan Islandia, itu mengeluhkan tentang ketidaktransparan persyaratan impor di beberapa negara, termasuk penerbitan registrasi approval number oleh Uni Eropa. Jadi kita mengusulkan agar FAO dapat memfasilitasi perihal tersebut, termasuk yang tidak kalah penting kasus COVID yang memunculkan persyaratan baru di China pada saat itu, juga kita sampaikan di forum Coffee agar kasus COVID tidak menjadikan hambatan baru bagi ekspor produk perikanan. Poin berikutnya kita juga menyampaikan, itu disampaikan pada sesi overview of recent trends in the fisheries and aquaculture sector. Kemudian berikutnya pada bulan Juli kita juga melakukan pendekatan secara informal ke pihak Uni Eropa, yaitu mengunjungi DG Sante dan DG Trade untuk memohon agar approval number atau penerbitan approval number baru bagi eksportir Indonesia dapat dipertimbangkan lagi. Sementara seperti itu, Pak Ibu dan Bapak Ibu, dapat kami sampaikan beberapa usaha yang telah dilakukan KKP dalam hal ini untuk mengurangi hambatan ekspor ke luar negeri. Sedangkan melalui forum formal perundingan tetap dilaksanakan, baik melalui forum perundingan bilateral maupun regional. misalnya untuk yang kasus ke EU itu saat ini juga sedang menuju konklusi untuk perundingan Indonesia EU CEPA. Demikian kami sampaikan. Sementara demikian Pak Ipung dan Bapak Ibu, terima kasih.
Okay, Dora, she informed us that the ministry has raised issues on the transparency of import restriction or import regulation in some countries, and also they have approached DG Sante and DG Trade in the EU regarding the addition of approval number for our industry, for our fish seafood industry. Now, Dora, you have time?
Ibu sedikit menambahkan yang tadi disampaikan di forum session of the Coffee Subcommittee on Trade on Fish Trade yang ke-18 di Bali, Pak, bulan Juni yang lalu. Terima kasih.
The issues were raised in the coffee trade session in Bali last June. Okay, Dora, while waiting for Nima, do you have anything to respond?
Sure, I can just take over what Nima was just doing. I'm going to go back to the platform. I think one of the questions, I'm not sure if it was answered or not, was whether this is food and feed in the report. So yes, indeed, it's food and feed products. So I'm going to share my screen and I'll be happy to walk you through the tool. Let's see. Yeah, here you go. So I'll go back exactly to where Nima was. So if you click on word map to get a global view of the rejections, and you'll have to excuse the tool, it's a bit slightly slower. Okay, great.
So while waiting for it, I will explain to the audience, Bapak-bapak dan Ibu-ibu, untuk mengecek rejection data, ini ada itu di atas, ada linknya ya, hub.unido.org/ rejection data word map. Di situ nanti bisa kita melihat rejection di setiap negara ya dengan HS code tertentu, nanti akan keluar datanya. Okay, Dora, please continue.
Oh, sure. So yeah, if you want me to go a couple of steps back, but basically once you pick the tool, there's these three categories: word map, data explorer, and country profile. So right now I clicked on word map to get this overview of the entire world to find out, for example, in the import market of the EU in 2020, if I'm interested in bacterial contamination, let's say, I think Nima had picked seafood. I think are here, fish, yes. Go to find out how well is Indonesia doing. I'll see.
It's Dora is HS code 03.
Ah, thank you. Oh, there you go. I knew that was a better one. Thank you very much. Let's see. Okay, great. So here, okay, great to see that you're back. I'll just finish this one if you want and give it back to you. So this is the global map to find out using the relative rejection rate. And if we go to all reasons, maybe we'll get better numbers. Find out a bit more information. Where is, for the seafood sector in the EU market, how well countries are doing in 2020. And here you'll just have to navigate to Indonesia to find out it's 2. Which I think in this case, the lower would be the better compliance. So 2 is slightly on the higher side, is showing lower compliance. So you want to improve that number. As you can see, 2 is here and 3 would be the highest. And then if you're interested, you can see some other competitors in the region, in the EU market, how well they're doing, such as Malaysia, who's doing quite well with 0, and not sure who are the direct competitor, but I would assume Vietnam is another one besides Malaysia. Thailand is not doing well. I think we've seen Vietnam just now. I missed it, but I think I saw Vietnam doing quite, 3, even worse. Okay. So Indonesia, I think could use to improve this number. And then if you're interested in other products, you'll be able to navigate here and find out in a specific market how you're doing. So if you're interested, here are the 5 markets. This is kind of a global view. It just gives you one indicator, but it's still interesting. And then down the line, you'll find out also where your country is situated in this curve. I'm gonna get into too much details, but I think I will go to country profile, which is what we based the entire first part of our presentation analysis about. And yeah, if you want to take over and show them the country profile, Nima, you're welcome to. It takes some time to load to Indonesia. Let me go back to.
I can do if it's faster from my side. If you think.
Yeah, my computer takes some time to load, unfortunately. So I don't
okay,
wanna...
no problem. I will do from my side. So basically, if you go to the country profile, let's say if we select Indonesia, and you would be able to see some, of course, descriptive indicators. These are general indicators. We don't go through them. They're not rejection based, but they are supposed to paint a picture of the importance of food and feed or agriculture sector within the economy in terms of the population, value added, also in terms of the logistics that they are supporting, facilitating trade of those products. But when it comes to rejection, you would basically see the same indicators now at the country level. So this table remains the same because you have seen it also in the other ones. And now that's for Indonesia. But you will have also the unit rejection rate. Now here at the country level, you would be able to compare between the products. So let's keep, for example, HS1 to HS2 and 3. That is the whole food and feed. So that gives you a big picture of the export of food and feed products. And here you can see, for example, in the green one is Australia. So that's the green line is performance of Indonesia in Australian market. And the solid line, the gray line, is the average of the income group. So I think here it's obvious that only in one case in 2011, Indonesia was performing worse than the average and consistently has been lower than the average. And even though there has been spikes in the rejection, Indonesia has done relatively better than the average. The same one can see clearly with China. In all the markets, Indonesia has been lower than the average, so has been performing well. But you can also select other specific products groups that you're interested in. For example, if you select fish, then you may see some changes. For instance, you can see here there has been in China, for instance, we see in 2019 has been higher rejections, or in the case of the EU and the fisheries products, see that is no more the nice picture of food and feed, where Indonesia was indeed lower than average of income group. Here in the case of the EU and fisheries products, we see higher rejection from Indonesia than the average of the income group in the EU. So that shows to us that seafood exports to the EU is indeed facing some problems, and it is consistent. So you can see from as far back as 2010, this has been the trend. In some cases, slightly lower than the average, but again, it has gone up and it has remained higher than the average. So this can really point to you that seafood exports to the EU is a main issue. Now, how can we let's say, take it further? So why has been this rejection? So if you now look at scroll down, look at the reasons for rejection, and you select the seafood products, then you can see in the EU, it actually has been heavy metal that has caused the rejections, followed by hygienic conditions and controls and bacterial contamination. So I think before there was a discussion on bacterial contamination, but not on heavy metals. But here we see that from Indonesia in the EU, where we see there has been a relatively worse performance, it has been caused by 3 major issues: heavy metals, almost 44% of the rejections, bacterial contamination, close to 18%, and 20%, 21% hygienic controls. So that can easily tell us that in terms of export to the EU, fisheries products could be a focus, and within the fisheries products, hygienic conditions and controls, heavy metal and bacterial contamination can be a problem to be focused on. That the problem now, the work starts from here. Now, when we look at, for example, heavy metal, in order to analyze what are the sources of this problem, this tool does not tell us more, right? So that's what I mean by tip of the iceberg. It shows us the tip of the iceberg. Now is the work to go and start analyzing what are the root causes of heavy metal contamination. What are the root causes of bacterial contamination? Is it a problem at the aquaculture practices that leads to that? Is it a regulatory problem? Is it a problem of conformity assessment? Is it a problem of environmental conditions? What are the problems that needs to be fixed? So then once we have this kind of navigation and we understand where to focus, then we will be able to dig deeper and analyze the problem in more depth. But that's just a kind of a utility of the tool. So I think I addressed some of the questions in terms of the HS codes. So yes, one can indeed categorize based on the HS codes, and you can also look at the problems at the value or product level, at the country level in more details. So yeah, if there's anything else, I think we could definitely we could answer. The data, this platform is available, so you can access it. The data behind this is also accessible. So if, for instance, the Ministry of Agriculture is interested to do a particular study on a particular product, putting Indonesia and comparing with 10 more countries, which is not possible in the website, we would be, of course, very happy to provide the data and provide the expertise for analysis of those data to have a joint research on that. So that is also possible. So this platform is not the only, let's say, availability of data. The data behind this is also available and can be put to use for specific tailored studies that, for example, Indonesia would be interested in.
Okay, thank you very much, Nima. I think this is the most important information that we got from UNIDO. So I hope everybody from now can access the platform and see what type of products that are rejected year by year and on what reasons, right? So it's a great job, great work from UNIDO. Silakan yang lain teman-teman ini nanti bisa melihat, mengecek ya produk apa saja yang ditolak, tahun berapa, oleh negara mana, apa alasannya. Baik, Nima, the data, was it based on cases, or do you have any data based on value or quantity that are rejected?
Value is not possible always because some of the markets do not provide the value, but quantity, yes, and the count is basically consignment of export. So that is let's say a container, for example. We can say there's like 5 containers. That's the value. And normally we have also, sometimes we have the weight as well. So the measure of quantity is more accurate that we have. That's why we do not we used to calculate the economic loss based on the value, but now we are not, because there are a lot of variations in that, and it's not is too much estimation. So, but the quantity is indeed a piece of information that we get from the rejection data.
So the ones that we were showing to us is based on
quantity.
Quantity, okay.
I mean, some indicators we measure it. Let's say the relative rejection or unit rejection rate. We put that quantity into the value context. So we say the quantity of consignments rejected within every 1 million of export, right? So we kind of contextualize that within the value.
Ya, okay. Jadi tadi datanya adalah berdasarkan quantity. Is it weight or consignment?
Consignment.
Consignment. Jadi consignment. Bukan weight ya, it's not weight, right? It's consignment.
Consignment.
Baik, kita tadi pengiriman, bukan berat. Bapak-bapak dan ibu-ibu, saya kira tetap saja data itu sangat bagus dan silakan dicatat, itu sudah ada tertulis di situ yang dikirim oleh Ibu Ita Suwalia, alamatnya. Silakan dicatat, nanti kapan-kapan bisa ditengok kembali. Okay, now the time is 4:11 Indonesian time, and according to the schedule, we have to stop by 16:15. So if there is no more question or comments, I would like to convey this conversation or this, let's say, this microphone to Ibu Ita Suwalia. Silakan Bu Ita.
Baik, terima kasih banyak Pak Ipung. Terima kasih juga untuk pembicara kita dan reviewer. Thank you very much for the speaker, Ibu Dora, Pak Nima. It was a great analytical result. So not analysis ya Pak Ipung, analytical result. So we would like to thanks also for the reviewer for the excellent feedback to validate the report. And of course, we say thanks for Pak Ipung as the moderator for the very interactive session. Please give a big applause emoji Bapak Ibu to your Zoom account. Bapak Ibu, we come forward to recap that will be delivered by Pak Sudari Pawiro, the National Chief Technical Advisor of Global Quality and Standard Program, UNIDO Indonesia. Pak Sudari, the screen is yours, Bapak.
Baik, Mbak Ita. Good afternoon, Bapak Ibu sekalian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, thanks Dora and Nima for the excellent presentation. I think this is really enlightening us on this platform, ya. So thanks a lot. And so thanks, terima kasih kepada Bapak Ibu sekalian yang telah memberikan review. I think the one thing that I would like to check probably, ya. So this report will be finalized based on the feedback today. And if there is any feedback, written feedback, we are welcome, yeah. And then we will use this feedback to finalize the report. Yeah. When the report is finalized, we will. I don't know whether are you going to publish it, or you will be submitted to the government of Indonesia. What is the next? Nima and Dora, may I know?
Sure. Before that, Pak Sudari, if there is comments or input from the audience where this should be sent.
This will
Dora, to what?
I think we will compile here, and then Puita can give an email address and also contact number. Yeah, I think in to the audience, yeah, and then they can send it by WhatsApp or we can send it to us by email. Then from there we will compile and then put it together and send it to Nima and Dora.
Ya, yes, silakan Ibu Ita boleh taruh di sini. Itu dia. i.suwalia@unido.org. Silakan komen pertanyaan dikirimkan ke Ibu Ita Suwalia.
I think we will. Yeah.
Silakan.
We will wait until we will give one week. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yes, Dora. So what is your plan? I mean, when you finalize it, you will kind of publish it and then. Yes, please.
Nima, did you want to answer or should I answer? I think the plan is indeed to publish it, to circulate it in a digital format, to publish a few physical copy and share it with some of maybe, I think besides the government, maybe some of the interested parties that attended this meeting. So the Ministry of Agriculture, of Fisheries, etc. So everyone who can be interested in this kind of analysis. And then I think digitally, and I'm guessing online, within the documents we publish in UNIDO, we'll have it there as well.
Okay.
That's the
Thanks,
plan.
Dora. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I think we can wait the feedback. Yeah. If there is any feedback until probably next week, then we will compile it and then share with Nima and Dora. And then the most important also is that a lot of questions that Nima already explained and also Dora, yeah, regarding the detail of the data and also specific product harmonized code. I think as Pak Ipung mentioned, jadi Bapak Ibu sekalian, Bapak Ibu boleh pergi boleh cek di website itu available, accessible, public domain ya, so you can check. Jadi tadi seperti disampaikan Nima, kalau misalnya memerlukan what is behind the data ya, behind the platform. There is a data. So kalau ada yang diperlukan misalnya specific study, kita bisa juga memberikan assistance atau bantuan. Nanti silakan kontak kami. Dan tapi pertama-tama barangkali Bapak Ibu perlu cek di platformnya, coba exercise membuat dicek mungkin interestnya lain-lain ya, ada yang dari perikanan, ada fisheries, kemudian ada yang agriculture, coffee atau rubber atau palm oil atau processed food. Jadi saya kira range-nya cukup besar ya, jadi harmonized code 1 sampai 23 saya kira cukup besar dan itu yang paling banyak diekspor di Indonesia. Jadi silakan dicek dan kalau ada pertanyaan silakan nanti disampaikan kepada kami. So I think the important thing probably if there is any need to have kind of another socialization for different specific products, yeah, probably fisheries. Since we are working on fisheries or other product, probably we can provide. Yeah, so next probably if there is any need, we can go through the platform very in details and then have a workshop session with different sector or different value chain. I think that is possible. Yeah, Nima on Dora.
Yes, absolutely. We can certainly organize additional workshops on a specific products group, and I think we can also define the key questions that we want to ask, right, to address in those workshops. So defining those, let's say, topics would be also good. Then we can do the analysis. If we need to go back to the data, the main database to do the analysis, we can do. We could also organize it in a way, kind of a common way. So not only us bringing the perspective of the rejection, but also from the local institutions bringing their perspective. So I think we can have a kind of more, let's say, interactive workshop. But certainly it's possible to choose and define the more specific questions and sectors and to have additional workshops.
Yeah, thanks Nima. So Bapak Ibu sekalian, I think ini platform ini ya tool ya, as the name is tool. The important thing is to analyze, reasonnya, kemudian untuk menetapkan prioritas ya, barangkali capacity building atau policies. Jadi itu barangkali yang perlu di follow up. Nanti kalau diperlukan, nanti Bapak Ibu sampaikan kepada kami, misalnya workshop khusus katakanlah coffee atau palm oil atau fisheries. Nanti dari situ kita gali data-data lebih detail dan analisis dan dari situ barangkali bisa memberikan kira-kira di mana untuk pinpoint kira-kira prioritas untuk pembinaan ya. Kita tahu lah tadi dari presentasi disampaikan bahwa performance Indonesia in general very good ya. Ada yang lebih baik dari negara lain, tapi ada beberapa yang perlu diperbaiki. Tadi khusus perikanan barangkali di EU kita tahu semua, kita masih menghadapi masalah. Jadi dari masalah itulah barangkali nanti kita bisa pinpoint untuk pembinaan, untuk policies-nya bisa lebih fokus dan barangkali bisa mengangkat ekspor dari Indonesia bukan hanya fisheries tapi juga produk lain. Jadi Bapak Ibu sekalian sekali lagi terima kasih atas kontribusinya. Thanks a lot for the review. So we are still open for feedback. So we will wait until end of next week probably and then kalau ada apa-apa yang ingin disampaikan, ingin di follow up silakan sampaikan kepada kami. Jadi tadi Bu Wita sudah menyampaikan kontaknya bisa melalui WA atau melalui email. Saya kira itu Pak yang follow up daripada kami dan kami atas nama UNIDO Global Quality and Standard Programs mengucapkan banyak terima kasih atas partisipasinya dan mudah-mudahan ini bisa membantu Indonesia untuk meningkatkan ekspor sesuai dengan prioritas dari pemerintah. Sekian dan saya kembalikan kepada Mbak Ita. Thanks Nima and Nadura.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Pak Sudari. Many thanks for the recommendation and also the way forward. I would like to reiterate first regarding the feedback. We're still waiting for next week, 23rd of December, before Christmas holiday. And if needed, socialization of specific workshop per product, it's possible for UNIDO to provide and facilitate. And then the last one, Bapak Ibu could follow up and access the platform, SGA platform, to determine the follow-up needed. And ladies and gentlemen, we would like to also thanks for the feedback that delivered through the chat box by Pak Hendra, Pak Alex, and also Pak Aris Sipo. We are now arrived at the end of the event, and we would like to invite Bapak Widya Rustanto, the Director of Processing and Quality Development of MMAF, to officially close the event. Pak Widya, please, time is yours. Assalamualaikum Pak Widya.
Waalaikumsalam. Terima kasih, Mbak Ita. Bapak Ibu semua, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, dear distinguished, yang terhormat, Mr. Nima Bahramalian, Mrs. Dora Berebeh, kemudian para perwakilan dari kementerian, Pak Ahmad Purnomo, sebagai moderator, Pak Sudari, tenaga ahli UNIDO, kemudian Bapak dan Ibu peserta yang kami hormati. Pertama-tama, atas nama Direktur Jenderal Penguatan Daya Saing Produk Kelautan dan Perikanan, kami mengucapkan terima kasih yang sebesar-besarnya kepada Bapak dan Ibu yang telah hadir pada kegiatan Validation Workshop of the Standard Compliance Analytics Report yang telah dilaksanakan secara virtual pada hari ini. Tidak lupa saya ucapkan terima kasih kepada narasumber dan para peserta yang telah memberikan materi, masukan, dan saran dalam rangka membangun finalisasi draft laporan analisis kepatuhan standar Indonesia atau analisis penolakan produk Indonesia yang ada di perbatasan negara-negara importir utama. Bapak Ibu semua, kami menyadari tantangan dalam perdagangan produk pangan Indonesia semakin lama semakin ketat, dan tentunya ini harus diminimalisir, dan sebagai solusinya harus dapat ditemukan alasan-alasan utama penolakan tersebut, di mana tadi para narasumber sudah menyampaikan dengan baik dan sangat luar biasa. Semoga ini bisa mendorong perkembangan sektor perekonomian Indonesia untuk dapat bersaing di kancah internasional. Terus terang, saya mengikuti dari awal dan sangat luar biasa rekomendasi yang diberikan. Tentunya bisa menjadikan masukan untuk kami untuk memperbaiki sistem dan kebijakan pembinaan, pengawasan, dan pengendalian kepada para pelaku usaha mulai dari hulu sampai ke hilir. Semoga apa yang dilakukan, yang dihasilkan hari ini dapat memberikan manfaat yang besar bagi kebaikan dunia perdagangan produk Indonesia dan peningkatan kesejahteraan masyarakat kita semua. Kemudian tadi juga selain terkait dengan non-tarif ya, jadi saya sepakat juga boleh kita bahas terkait dengan penolakan terkait dengan tarif ya. Pak Sudari mohon nanti juga dapat difasilitasi, dan saya juga sangat sepakat bahwa perlu kita adakan pertemuan by komoditas ya, berkomoditas untuk melihat yang sudah disampaikan oleh Mr. Nima dan Mrs. Dora, untuk melihat masing-masing bagaimana mengatasi permasalahan tersebut. Sekali lagi kami mengucapkan terima kasih banyak, dan secara resmi saya tutup kegiatan validasi workshop of standard compliance analytical report pada hari ini. Sekali lagi terima kasih dan mohon maaf dari Ibu Dirjen. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore, good afternoon. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih
banyak, Direktur. Thank you very much, Pak Director, that has been joined from the beginning of the opening of the workshop until the end of the workshop. Pak Director also give advice to further have the follow-up, to have specific workshop for each commodity, to have clearly or sharpening the recommendation that can be following up by our government of Indonesia, not only at the downstream, but also starting from the upstream of the processing. And Bapak Ibu, it's been pleasure of being with you all of you on behalf of UNIDO, MMAF, and BSN. We would like to thank for your active participations, kind attention, and present. I wish you all very good evening. Thank you very much. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Bye-bye.
Terima kasih banyak. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nima. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Sudari.
Pak Sudari, terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Widya, Pak
Selamat
Direktur
sekali.
ya.